Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party and the County Chair of Suffolk County Republican Party, and our good friend and colleague, Eric Levine, noted essayist, political analyst, attorney, commentator. And last week, we had a guest, Matt Taylor, and I said Matt was our special guest, and Eric was a little nonplussed because I said he was just a special guest. So I hereby elevate you by the power granted to me under the state constitution. You are now a special guest, Eric.
Eric, it's only because you're here and no one else is.
All right.
You're special in all our hearts, Jesse.
Okay, so let's begin with the border crisis and the destruction of America. This is my take. You have a president of the United States who has failed to fulfill his oath of office. It's a violation of our immigration laws. He's caused a crisis in this country. You don't have to be too astute to see that the cities are being overflown with these people. We don't know who they are, whether they're drug traffickers, cartel people, ordinary criminals, whether they have diseases, whether they're child molesters, whether they have criminal records in the old country, because there's no way to figure out who they are and what they've done. And they've been let loose all around our country. It started with Biden flying people out to Suffolk and Nassau counties and Westchester, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. The Democrats have this outrage at how dare the governor of Texas send people to New York. I don't blame the governor of Texas. He's trying to get attention on the fact that every city, every county, every area is now a border town. And I'm very concerned, gentlemen, about the future of America with this border crisis. And last night on the show, we had Michael Goodwin from the New York Post on Katz and Cosby. And I said to Michael, and he agreed with me, I said, even if they shut the border today and no one came in again, we'd still have a crisis on our hands because you have all this overflow of people running around. You can't put them in hotels in Midtown because you'll destroy Midtown. You can't put them in communities that are not able to handle them, like Nassau or Suffolk or Westchester or Orange or Putnam. You just can't do that. They have to seal the border. And Eric Adams says with Governor Hochul they need more money. No, they don't need more money. They need to honor the immigration laws, and Biden has to do his job and honor his oath of office. Eric, what do you say?
Yeah, so I agree with all of that. But I think that a little history helps put this in perspective. During the George W. Bush administration, he attempted to pass a bipartisan immigration reform. But a junior senator from Illinois by the name of Barack Obama used the filibuster to kill that legislation. Now, remember, of course, this is the same Barack Obama who has recently said that the filibuster is a vestige of white supremacy. But he used that to help kill bipartisan immigration reform during the Bush years. In the first 2 years of the Obama administration, from 2009 to 2011, Obama had filibuster-proof majorities in the Senate, and he controlled the House. He could have done anything he wanted to do. He could have passed any legislation he wanted. But he didn't even propose a single immigration bill. No immigration reform, nothing. And that's because Democrats want an issue and not a solution. They want to be able to call Republicans bigots and racists. But now it's come back to bite them in the rear end. It's completely out of control. To a point you were making, Richard, this completely erases the concept of it being a nation. Nations have borders. No borders, no nation. Today, the U.S. has no southern border. Anyone from anywhere can come for any reason, whether they're a member of a drug cartel, human trafficker, terrorists, and just cross our border. And they brought with them enough fentanyl. Enough fentanyl crosses our border almost virtually every day to kill every man, woman, and child in the country. It comes from China, but it's distributed by the drug cartels from the southern border. And it's important to know that more U.S. citizens have died from fentanyl overdoses in 2022, 109,000 in 1 year alone, than Americans that died during the entire Vietnam War, 58,220. If that is not a war in America, I do not know what is. We know where the cartel leaders are. We know where the facilities are. And with or without Mexican counterparts, we should be prepared to deploy U.S. military to take out the drug leaders, drug cartels, and their facilities. Then all of a sudden the drugs will stop coming across our border. That will solve part of the problem. We can't leave it to President Obrador of Mexico to protect our border or anyone else to protect the border. It's our responsibility. But he's in bed with the cartels and he's turned the border over to the cartels. We cannot allow that to continue to happen. Another point you were making, Richard, the Democratic Party pretends to be the party that cares about women and children. But they allow sex trafficking and they use children as smugglers. And this is the same party, Joe Biden, who betrayed millions of women and children in Afghanistan when he catastrophically surrendered there and turned back the clock from the 21st century to the 6th century, put women back into the Stone Age as chattel and slaves. But of course, they claim to care about women. This is clearly also a national security issue. The Border Patrol has picked up illegal aliens crossing our southern border from countries like Yemen, Iran, Syria, China, all over the world. These aren't people just walking from Mexico or Nicaragua or El Salvador. These are people that are coming from all over the world, and they're not coming to do good things. And another point you made, Richard, the Democrats demonstrate their utter contempt for the rule of law. If they enforced our immigration laws, we would not be in this situations. We hear from Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul pleading for more money from the federal government. They claim it's unfair that so many illegal aliens find their way to New York City and that we have to pay for it. Now, I understand it's expensive to pay to house these people in some of the nicest hotels and some of the nicest neighborhoods in the city. I'm sure a lot of American citizens who can't afford really expensive hotels or homes in the suburbs would love to have it subsidized. But we only do that for illegal aliens. But it's hard to take Hochul and Adams particularly seriously as long as New York City and New York State remain sanctuary cities and sanctuary state. They're intentionally standing up and saying, we choose to ignore federal law. You know, this is the same strategy that the southern states strategy of nullification that the southern states used leading up to the Civil War. What a coincidence. The southern states were led by Democrats, just like those who don't want to enforce who want to nullify our immigration laws are also Democrats. But unless the Democrats take seriously the rule of law and start enforcing our federal immigration laws and renounce sanctuary cities and renounce sanctuary states, it's really difficult to feel sorry for us. I mean, unfortunately, we all live in New York. We pay the price, but we elect people to follow these policies. And until we kick these people out, this is just going to continue.
Jesse, your turn.
It's difficult to add to both of you have said, because that's where we stand. You've given a history lesson. You see what we failed. I think what we need to also look, maybe where I could add, is we look at the present day where we are now. We've seen what the Democrat playbook is. The Democratic playbook is to leave the border open and let this unfettered, unvetted migrants come through the border and be placed in different parts of our country. As you said, every hamlet, every neighborhood is now a border town. But I think that what we need to do is we have to speak to what has been done or is being attempted to show the differences between the failed immigration policies and the border policies of the Democratic Party and the social policies of like a sanctuary city or sanctuary state, and that which are being now waged by Republican-led counties. We've seen that in Orange, and I believe it was Dutchess, seeking temporary restraining orders to stop the placement of unvetted migrants in their counties. But we've had Bruce Blakeman from Nassau County, the county executive, make very strong worded statements and policy on protecting his neighborhoods, his communities, and his residents from a failed federal policy. And of course, here in Suffolk County, where our county executive and the Democrats have been silent, and they use the same old playbook in the politics of when you're losing an issue, you yell racism. This is not a racism. What the Democrats are doing is nothing more than, it's not humanitarian, it's human warehousing. It's not humanitarian at all. And that's why I'm proud that the Suffolk County legislature is taking the lead to ensure that we have the legal tools in place and the legal authority in place and the legal personnel in place to ensure that we seek the similar temporary restraining orders and we use every tool available in the county charter to prevent the placement of unvetted migrants in our communities. Because basically, this is just another attempt. It's like another attempt at local control at the expense of local control. You want to have the state come in with the city to dictate what happens in our communities with nothing, no input, no work by the counties. That's why we're looking right now at a very curious situation with the SUNY system being used to basically warehouse these unvetted migrants. And one of them specifically is in the SUNY Stony Brook University in the northern part of Brookhaven town and in Suffolk County. I think that it's right. This issue, you're right, Eric. The Democrats never wanted to solve this issue when they've had full control of the federal government, the executive branch plus the legislative branch. They had it twice and they didn't do it. But what they do now have a situation is that they've overreached. And now even moderates and moderate Democrats are taking a turn and saying, this is not right. Why? Whether we like it or not, it's more of a situation. They don't want this to happen in my backyard.
Well,
You know, and what's really sad also is that I think there's a general consensus in the country as to how to solve the immigration problem. I think most Americans who are in the center of the American body politic would agree that we should expand legal immigration, but first secure the border truly secure the border, and then take those children that came, the DACA kids, who've known only America as their home, and make them citizens. Many of them have served in the military. Now, I reject the concept that this is, I'm forgetting the word. When you break the law and then you get a pass, it's amnesty. This is not amnesty because children cannot break the law, right? If you come across as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 8-year-old, you cannot break the law. So it cannot be amnesty. This is the only country they've known they should be made citizens. However, their parents, the adults who crossed illegally, should never allowed to become citizens. However, let's be realistic here. We're not going to be rounding up 15 million people and sending them back home. It just is not conceivable that we can do that. But for all those that have not committed crimes, all those people who came across who have not committed crimes, they should be required to pay a penalty. They should be required to pay back taxes, and they should be put on the books so they can start paying taxes going forward. For all those who've been committed crimes, they all go out. Either they go to prison or they all get sent back. And I think that's a majority of where the country is. It's reasonable, it's rational. But the absolute very first thing that must happen, which we've learned from the Reagan era when they had immigration reform then, it's the last time we've had meaningful immigration reform, the first thing that must happen is secure the border, period, end of sentence. Reagan, the big mistake that Reagan made in his immigration reform is that he agreed to allow certain citizens in or make them citizens with the idea that we'll secure the border later.
no,
That
that can't work. That can't work. By definition, it can't work. You know,
We must secure the border first.
Congressman Peter King just had an article, and he pointed out, which is a matter of real concern to Jesse and to me, because we both have our connections to Suffolk County, which is the last time they had an open border problem, MS-13 came in, and these young kids, you say, well, they're just kids. They were recruited by MS-13. Some of the kids coming over were already MS-13, and you had Jesse, 25, 27 murders of young people, terror.
Exactly.
Terror in the migrant communities, in the immigrant communities. They terrorize their own people. So that's number one. You have to understand that this is not about being nice. This is about security, both of the border and of the communities. That's a very important thing to understand. You cannot have a government that functions unless you have a national border, and you can't have communities that work unless you know who your neighbors are and hold them responsible. And throwing money at the problem will just encourage more people to come in illegally. And promising them working papers is another encouragement to come in illegally. And as for sanctuary cities, gentlemen, I'll tell you what I say about sanctuary cities. If you're a governor, if you're a mayor, if you're a county executive, and if you do not cooperate with law enforcement and the immigration services, you should be thrown out of office. You have no right holding office because you swore an allegiance to the laws of the country. And there's no such thing as a matter of law as a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state. It's a political makeup, and it's an awful thing to have done to this country. And yet nobody's held to account for that fantasy.
And
Your Honor, to your point on MS-13.
What does that tell? What message does that send to the children of America? That if elected officials can choose to violate federal law,
sure,
of course we can loot a store. What's the big deal? Of course we can jump the turnstile. What's the big deal? Of course we can commit this crime. What's the big deal? The adults do. The elected officials do it. We either all live by the law or we don't.
Exactly right, Eric. Jesse.
To your point of MS-13, MS-13 is not a homegrown problem. We've seen when the border was open and they didn't have the tight security that there was when President Trump was in office, that's where it grew here in communities like Brentwood and throughout the country, because they were crossing that border and they were making inroads and being embedded in communities, and they were now growing their membership there. And one of the things that was appetizing for the voters of Suffolk County 2 years ago is that our district attorney, Ray Tierney, when he was seeking the office, he was an assistant U.S. attorney who went to the border. He briefed the Attorney General Sessions, and he briefed President Trump on his visit here to Brentwood in Suffolk County on the MS-13 problem. He ran the lead on those issues. So this is a matter where we are basically opening up our doors and letting the criminals come in and take over.
And
I just want to add one more thing for the record to reflect. I grew up in Suffolk County, so I have a very strong connection there. I went to Waltman High School in South Huntington, so I feel deeply for the people of Suffolk County.
And listen, it's not just Suffolk County. It's going to be all the counties. It's going to be everywhere until this abdication of responsibility is stopped. Kevin has given us 100%. That sign. We'll be taking a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted commentator, lawyer, and essayist. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in a moment with more interesting conversation. Thank you.
This is Let the Record Show.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, noted lawyer, commentator, essayist, Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Well, my broad question to you, gentlemen, is this. Yeah, everybody's saying it's a done deal for the nominations of the two great American parties in 2024. Everybody seems to believe that it's almost the law of inevitability that it'll be Biden as a Democratic candidate and Trump as a Republican candidate. And my question to both of you, gentlemen, is really can't we do any better? Now, you have different entrants into the race so far on the Republican side. Earlier, you had Tim Scott, Senator Scott. Then you had Governor DeSantis. You have Ambassador and Governor Nikki Haley. There are other people who are talking about running. This is my take on Biden versus Trump, and then I want your thoughts. These people should get off the stage. Trump is a failed president. No, he was a successful president. Biden, a failed president, absolutely, positively a failed president, and has put this country in great danger. What was Trump's problem? He had an unfortunate personality. He made enemies. He alienated people, and people didn't like him. But if you look at the issues that he supported and what he did, he's actually a very successful president. He was not a failed president, but he was not a unifier. Biden certainly is not a unifier either, because Biden has been very clear that he made an inaugural speech about unifying the country. He's done everything possible to divide this country based on identity politics, racism, wokeism, political correctness. So I think we can do better than Biden versus Trump. I think the country needs us to do better than Biden versus Trump. Eric, what do you say?
I don't think there's any doubt with the conclusion, but where I take exception is Trump was not a failed president from the perspective that while he was president, he had many very effective policies. However, once January 6th occurred, he disqualified himself from being president, in my opinion. As soon as he lost, he started calling the election fake. He started lying about an election hoax. He went to Georgia and made sure Republicans lost 2 Senate seats and made sure that Chuck Schumer, he is responsible. Donald Trump is responsible for Chuck Schumer being the Senate leader because he purposely lost 2 seats in the Senate, giving them to the Democrats and giving the Democrats the majority.
Do you believe he purposely did that, or you think that he just didn't understand politics?
He went to Georgia and told Republicans, don't vote. Your vote does not count. He went specifically to Trump country. I think it was Georgia 4, specifically went there and said, don't show up and vote. And the difference between the numbers who had voted in the original election and voted in the runoff, the drop-off was quite significant. Owed exclusively to Trump going there and telling them to not show up and vote. Donald Trump lost 2 Senate seats for Republicans.
And the rest is history.
I'm sorry?
And the rest is history. You wouldn't have all these crazy left-wing programs and the deficit spending and the border being insecure and the policies that are just dividing this country and are not making us independent anymore because the Democrats are controlling the Senate. That's correct.
Right, and Donald Trump gave it to them. Donald Trump has midwifed the progressive agenda. He gave it birth. And then, of course, there's the election hoax, the lie about the election hoax. And then January 6th occurs. You may agree that Donald Trump was perfectly within his rights to call people to the ellipse and make a speech. Up to that point, it's absolutely protected speech. But once people started storming the Capitol, and he sat there, knowing it was going on, knowing that people's lives were at risk, in particular Vice President Mike Pence, where they were running through the Capitol chanting, hang Mike Pence, and he did nothing. Whether or not that's a crime, I won't say, I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you it's a complete dereliction of duty and a violation of his oath of office. And to this day, he has since said that it's okay to violate the Constitution to make sure that he wins. So this is a man who cannot become president, who cannot take the oath of office. He is not qualified to be president. Now, both he and Joe Biden are horror shows. We've seen what Joe Biden can do to the country. He's driving the country into a ditch. Yes, of course, we must be able to do better on both sides. We really need to be in the center. We need to get away from the extremes and move to the center. The problem is in the Democratic Party, there are no more moderate Democrats. They don't exist. There are moderate Republicans. That wing of the party exists. You have Nikki Haley, you have Tim Scott, Chris Sununu chooses to run, Ron DeSantis on most issues is kind of still at the Republican center. I understand some people may take exception to the abortion bill that he signed, but he's a rational human being. I mean, look what happened. Ron DeSantis announces for president, and Donald Trump issues some tweet that's utterly incomprehensible that virtually says, oh, I'm going to become really good friends with Kim Jong-un. A a remarkable tweet. I mean, it's really saying, remember me, I'm insane. I mean, that was the Donald Trump message. So whether it's Haley, Scott, Pence, DeSantis, the Republican Party can do far, far better. I don't have much, if any, hope for the Democrats because that party is now owned lock, stock, and barrel by the radical progressive left.
But the Democrats are absolutely shameful. They elect a guy who's not physically or intellectually fit for the job. They hide him out in a basement. He's totally failed on public policy. I don't know one success the guy has had. And the country is, as you say, is going into a ditch. And yet they're going to give us 4 more years to this guy if he gets reelected. I can't believe that they're so irresponsible.
Because because the progressive left can control him, and they like that power. That's why.
Jesse, your turn.
I think what we've demonstrated on this issue is the Republicans have a deep bench. I think when you see just this past week, Tim Scott, a senator from South Carolina, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announcing their candidacies, I think that generates the excitement that's going on in the Republican Party and touching base with also the electorate in general. Just in May 2nd, I believe there was a CBS Young Cub poll that showed, they showed Trump and where he is with everyone else. But I think what's more important is that 24% of those polled and the Republicans voters said they would only vote for Trump. 27% said they would vote for someone else. 49% said it would be Trump or another candidate. So what I think you can see is that you're going to see the Republican electorate, this Republican base, is going to shift as individuals drop out, or come back in. I think that you see 2 individuals like Tim Scott, who I believe is a bit of a wild card. And I believe that no matter what, for the Republican Party, the Republican brand, and the Republican policies, is a great national presence for the Republican Party. DeSantis, I think that it goes without saying. The Florida blueprint should be a blueprint for all states in this union. He's prepared to attack wokeness. I mean, his activity and his announcement on Twitter broke Twitter for all those issues and such. And I think that he's articulated, because we watched him this past week on Fox News and different news outlets. He identified and laid out straight up answers on a number of issues that are important, that would be important in policies that he will be instituting, from education and so on and so forth, the military and such. So I think what you're seeing is, as big as maybe this Republican field is, it's really going to be contracting to maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 candidates on the outside that truly will make a difference. We know that Donald Trump is in tune with the base of a strong part of the base of this party. But I also think that this party is going to be tired of losing on a national level. And at one point or another, it's going to have to make its decision at the ballot box on how we govern this country first, and then lead this party, secondly, to victories in the Senate and in the White House.
Well, I'll tell you something that deeply troubles me. Eric and I were at a dinner on Tuesday night, and Eric is one of the co-hosts. And we had 7 United States senators, all Republicans, and they were all talking on a basic theme. And that theme, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but the theme is very simple. This is the best chance that the Republican Party has of winning the Senate in the 2024 cycle. It has less of a chance in 2026 and far less of a chance in 2028. They have to win next year. They have to get the majority in the Senate. Now, why is that important? It's important because otherwise you're going to have a one-party government again, House, Senate, and the White House. And that's very dangerous for America. They always talk about a threat to democracy, a threat to our constitutional order. Well, let's be very, very clear. The real threat to the constitutional order is coming out of the Democratic Party. They want to abolish the Electoral College. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to eliminate the filibuster. They have constant false attacks against members of the Supreme Court of the United States to try to intimidate them. There's a leak of a Supreme Court decision, and they've never found out the answer. And clearly, in my humble opinion, it had to be somebody who was against the draft opinion, which was talking about abolishing Roe versus Wade. I think it's the Democrats that did it. It was Chuck Schumer went up on the steps of the Supreme Court and threatened justices that they would pay a price on
They
abortion.
would weep the whirlwind, as he said.
Right.
Weep the whirlwind.
And I'm very troubled as an American, as somebody who cares about this country deeply and worries about it for my children and grandchildren. This one-party rule, and especially it's an extreme one-party rule. It's a Marxist, socialist, intolerant party, and if they win the Senate, and the Republicans could very well lose the House and the presidency, where do we go from there, Eric?
Yeah, so I mean, just to pick up, I want to just touch on one thing Jesse said, then I'm going to come to your broader point. I do not agree with Jesse that Trump is in touch with the Republican base. Trump has a base, and I don't believe these polls. I think his base is roughly 25, maybe 30% of the Republican base, of the Republican primary voter. That leaves 65 to 70% of the Republican primary voter not supporting Trump. And that's why it's really important to keep the field narrow. You're talking about Ron DeSantis. One of the things that he said I found very troubling was his position on Ukraine, where he said it's just a border dispute. Not a border dispute, but that's going to be part of the debate between those in the Reagan wing of the party, like Nikki Haley and Tim Scott, and Ron DeSantis. But it's really important that Donald Trump not be the nominee, to the point, Richard, that you were making, that Donald Trump is probably the only Republican who would lose to Joe Biden. You could beat Joe Biden. Jesse could beat Joe Biden.
Well, I know Jesse could. I know Jesse could. I'm not so sure about me.
But Donald Trump can't. And if we lose the White House, being at the top of the ticket has a big impact on down ballot. There's no question that if Donald Trump were to be the nominee, all those 5 Republican House members that we were so proud of electing and gave the narrow majority in the House to Republicans and made Kevin McCarthy a Speaker of the House, they will all be wiped out. We picked up a number of seats in California. They will all be wiped out. And all these purple districts, they will all be wiped out. All that we'll have is potentially the Senate. The map is so favorable to Republicans this year. It's hard to imagine that even Donald Trump can screw that up, but he possibly could. He still possibly could. But if the Senate is, if the Republicans do not hold the Senate, then the country as we know it will end. Because
I agree.
Chuck Schumer will do away with the filibuster. Washington, D.C. will become a state. Republicans will make it virtually impossible for Republicans to ever win back the Senate. They will pack the court, and the entire God knows how much the socialism the country can accept and take. So it's critically important that Republicans win the Senate. What will make that really simple is if Donald Trump is not the nominee. Republicans must do better than Donald Trump.
Jesse.
I believe that, as I said, I think there's going to be a Republican that's going to come out of this field. It may be Donald Trump. It may be Ron DeSantis. It may be Tim Scott. It may be any one of those. I think that what's going to happen is I have confidence in, and then just to go back to what I said, as I said in the polling that we were discussing, it said that only 24% said they would only vote for Donald Trump. 27% said they would vote for someone else. And then it was up in the air with Trump or maybe someone else. So there's that 49% that is ready to go somewhere. And they're ready to move forward with a policy, a leader that is going to, first and foremost, take this country back into its leadership position. And number 2, have this Republican Party on the national level start winning again. Because you're absolutely right. Next year is a critical year of what needs to do for our country. But I also believe that what we do here locally and local elections throughout this country are going to be the foundation, once again, as we propel into 2024.
That's a good point. By the way, I'll tell you something. Talk about, changing the rules of the game. There's now a gambit going on in Albany, and then I have to stop with this because Kevin's given us the sign. But there's a gambit going on now, Jesse, to take the local elections, the so-called off-year elections, and run them the same even number of years of the presidency and when the House and the Senate are up. So what that means is the Republicans who have a stronger base in purely local elections are going to be at a great disadvantage. But nothing stops the left-wing Democrats up in Albany from changing the rules, and they're trying. It's another way of disenfranchising people who disagree with them, because they'll just pack the electoral system by putting it in. Because the turnout, as both of you know, the turnout in big years, the even number years, favors the Democratic Party and not the Republicans. Let's take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. With Jesse and myself is Eric Levine, noted commentator, essayist, and attorney. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be taking a break, and we'll be right back.
Let the Record Show is on the air.
Campfire season's back, and that means s'mores. But when you're at home treating yourself, take them over ice with Dunkin's S'mores Cold Brew Concentrate. And suddenly you're always treating yourself. The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be. Click or tap the banner to shop now.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
All right, welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party, distinguished attorney, essayist, and political commentator Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. I'll tell you what I don't understand, gentlemen, and I think it's the definition of insanity, which everyone knows is you keep doing the same thing and you expect a different outcome. And that's the continuous obsession by this administration, by the Biden administration, for a deal with Iran. My take on this is incredible. It is insane. Iran cannot be trusted. They want to be a nuclear power. They've pledged themselves to the destruction of the United States and Israel. They've destabilized the country. Obama gave them tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. What do they do with that? They fed terrorist machines, organizations. They have Israel encircled. Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, and our ally, and a source of much technological innovation as well as intelligence information. And yet they keep doing it. Somehow, if you keep giving them, you can bring them to the table, and it'll be a reasonable nation state. They are not a reasonable nation state. They are the leading state sponsor of terrorism. They are a threat to civilization, and it has to be confronted. And I just don't understand why Biden and Kerry and those people just don't get it. Kerry, who brought us the first deal, is more concerned with climate change. Climate change is not going to make any difference when the world is taken over by terrorism and adventurism by totalitarian regimes. Wake up, crazy left. Wake up. What's your take on this, on the Iran situation, Eric?
Well, I think what you're seeing with the obsession with the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, is the internationalization of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. The neo-Marxist view that everything must be viewed through the lens of race and gender, and that America is a systemically racist and evil country. Remember when Barack Obama became president, he went on his apology tour. This is right after he declared that America was not an exceptional nation. He went around the country, went around the world apologizing to countries, for all the horrible things the United States did, like defeating Nazism and liberating France and securing freedom of the high seas, all those horrible things that we did. But because America is systemically racist, we must contain, from the left's perspective, we must restrain American military power and projection of power abroad, because all that does is project that systemic racism and evilness that is America. So we must just bring everybody home. But one of the sins for which we must atone in the bizarro world of the progressives is that in 1953 there was a coup in Iran, where the democratically elected president of Iran, Mossadegh, was overthrown by the Shah. Now, everybody blames the CIA for doing that. It was during the Cold War, and they say because the CIA overthrew Mossadegh and put the Shah in control, and Mossadegh, of course, was moving dramatically towards the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Now, it's ahistorical that the CIA is responsible for the coup, putting the Shah in place, but we were perfectly happy that the Shah was put in place and succeeded in the coup because he was pro-Western and pro-Israel, by the way. Iran used to supply Israel with its oil before it made its own discoveries. But so that sin we must atone for. And now we must shift the focus of an Israel-centered Middle Eastern policy to an Iran-centered Middle Eastern policy. And that's what drove Obama, and that's what drove John Kerry. And now that President Biden is president, all he has in his office, in his administration, is a bunch of Obama retreads. I think it's really a great idea to continue to try to atone from this sin and apologize to Iran. Now, if they were straightforward and honest about what the Iran nuclear deal was about, we could have had an open debate, and we could have and everyone could have decided whether it was what we wanted to do. But Kerry and Obama continually lied to the American people. They kept saying it would block all paths to a nuclear weapon. What did it do? It guaranteed a legal path to a nuclear weapon. There were sanctions in place that blocked Iran's ballistic missile system. You only build ballistic missiles to be able to deliver a nuclear warhead. But what did the JCPOA do? It lifted sanctions on the ballistic missile system. So it gave them not just a path to a nuclear weapon, but the ability to deliver it. You now have a state, Richard, as you had said, is the leading state sponsor of terrorism. You have the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, sponsors overseas and trains and arms terrorist organizations throughout the world, but in particular the Middle East, the two most famous of which, of course, are Hezbollah and Hamas. And you have Islamic Jihad. You see the Israelis are having the most recent uprisings from Islamic Jihad. They're also an IRGC-trained terrorist organization. So they lift the sanctions on Iran and give them hundreds of billions of dollars. What does John Kerry say? Well, we're going to give them all this money. They're going to build schools. They're going to build hospitals. They're going to build roads. It will tamp down. It will modernize them. It will moderate them. Well, that was just a lie. He knew that it wasn't true. But now they want to do it all again. And they continue down the same path of lies, although they've shifted from its blocking all paths to a nuclear weapon to it will delay a nuclear weapon. But that wasn't the deal that was sold. The deal that was being sold was that they were going to block all paths to a nuclear weapon. And all they have succeeded in doing is empowering Iran. Every step, everything that flowed from that. Remember when Obama wouldn't enforce the red line in Syria? Why wouldn't he enforce the red line in Syria? Because Assad was Iran's closest ally in the Arab world. And Iran told Obama, if you punish Assad, we will back out of the deal. So Obama blanked, begged Putin to bail him out. And in exchange for Putin bailing him out, Russia now has a foothold in the Middle East.
Which had lost.
Yeah, Sadat threw them out in 1973. They've been effectually marginalized in the entire region. Now all of a sudden they're back, right? This is some of the genius that the JCPOA brought us. So the Iran nuclear deal is a disaster. Why do they want to do it again? Because it's a bunch of Obama retreads. But the other thing to keep in mind when they were putting it in place and they were lying to everybody, despite the fact that they were lying to the American people and lying before Congress, you had bipartisan opposition, overwhelming bipartisan opposition in the House, in the Senate, and the American electorate at large. But they rammed it down our throats anyway. So somehow that that doesn't sound particularly democratic to me. And they turned the concept of a treaty completely on its head. In the Constitution, a treaty requires 3/4 of the Senate to ratify a treaty. So what does Obama do? He says it's not a treaty. It's an administrative order. So of course that it doesn't have the effect of a treaty, so it can be overturned, which Donald Trump did in 2019. But he completely bastardizes the Constitution in order to get it passed. It was a treaty that should have been voted on as a treaty, but it was turned on its head, so that you needed 3/4 to block it, 3/4 of the Senate to block it. And then you had people like Chuck Schumer, who redefines empty suit, waited for Obama to make sure he had enough votes in the Senate to allow the deal to go through. And then all of a sudden he came out against it, very tepidly, but then all of a sudden he came out against it and said, you know what, it's a issue of conscience. I'm not going to twist anybody's arms. But
he should have been twisting the other way.
Congress if there was a bill in front of Congress that were to help unions or teachers unions or to give money away to illegal aliens, Chuck Schumer would have broken people's kneecaps to get that thing passed.
Jesse,
but an Iran nuclear deal that threatened Israel's existence, it's a matter of conscience.
Jesse, let me ask you this question. We understand this problem. What do you think that the Israelis should do as the clock is ticking to a fully armed nuclear Iran?
I think they have no choice but to defend themselves because they've seen their once strongest ally equivocating once again, whether it be the Biden administration or the Obama administration before that. It's the same situation where they are left alone in that region. Here we are abandoning our top ally in that region once again, and it's a disaster. It's a disaster for Israel. It's a disaster for the Middle East region, and it's a disaster for America's security. The other issue, just to touch upon how they manipulated this, is that I always believe, and with Obama, there's always a political calculation, whether he speaks out of both sides of his mouth or whatnot. The issue here is that when he sidestepped a vote of the Congress, he also made sure that it was that the Democratic Party did not take a political hit internally and domestically here in our nation and in our elections that were taking place that year.
It's very frightening. I'm very troubled because I believe that they've pushed Israel into a corner, and Israel is going to have to do something. And because Biden,
it's actually even worse than that. First of all, it's not clear that Israel has the ability right now. It's just not. I hope they do, but I don't know that they do. And then the question is, if they do decide to attack Iran, what will the Biden administration do? The good news for the Israelis in that regard is Joe Biden is not Barack Obama. Joe Biden is in his heart a supporter of Israel. He just doesn't know what he's doing anymore, and the policy's he's not running the policy. Somebody else is. But Biden is not anti-Israel in the way that Obama was. But what it also impacts, though, is look what's happening to the Abraham Accord countries, the UAE, Bahrain. They're being pushed towards China, right? They're being marginalized. They're being pushed towards China. Saudi Arabia, who we'd love to be able to bring into the Abraham Accords, they're being pushed to China because of the bizarro world, again, of the Biden administration that puts the Iran nuclear deal and the Palestinian issue above peace between the Israelis and the Arabs. Peace between Israelis and the Arabs only comes when they don't allow the Palestinians to hold peace hostage. Sadat made peace with Israel in 1978 because he was prepared to put the Palestinian issue to the side. So he and Begin signed the Camp David Accords. The Abraham Accords were signed because the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan all decided that they would, and Morocco would decided they would put the Palestinian issue aside because they know the Palestinians have no interest in making peace with the Israelis. They know the Palestinians are still wedded to destroying Israel. So they're not going to put their national security at risk and held hostage to an intransigent Palestinian leadership. So the one thing that the Abraham Accords truly recognized is that the Palestinian problem may be an intractable one, but certainly not one that can be solved today. So let's solve the problems we can solve now and worry about the other ones later. And then the two components of the Abraham Accords was not just trade between the Israelis and Arab countries, but it was to act as a bulwark, a military bulwark against the Iranian expansion in the region. And the Biden administration is undermining all of that. Who brokered a negotiation or an agreement between the Saudis and the Iranians? The Chinese. Who's trying to build G5 technology in the UAE and build a military base in the UAE? The Chinese. I don't understand the Biden administration. Even if you're operating from the premise we really hate the Israelis, we really must punish the Israelis, don't we love ourselves more? Don't we care about American security more? Everything that relates to the Iran deal, everything the Iran deal touches turns to garbage and compromises American national security.
Very well said. All right, Kevin has given us that sign. We'll be taking a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, esteemed attorney, essayist, and political commentator Eric Levine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in a few moments for our final segment of this week's Let the Record Show.
Let the Record Show is on the air. This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
We're back with Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, and esteemed commentator, essayist, and attorney Eric Levine. Well, I have to tell you something. I've come up with this expression years ago when I was at City Hall because I just couldn't believe that people would do certain things. It just made no sense to me. It was irrational. It was self-destructive. And to me, one of the biggest domestic policy failures and threats to America is what I call the true and devastating costs of the Green New Deal. When Trump was president, we were energy independent. We were self-sufficient. We were an exporter of oil. We made money. We supplied our allies. We supplied ourselves. And all of a sudden, you have this new religion called the Green New Deal, the climate change advocates who believe everything has to be seen through the lens of climate control and the Green New Deal. So what do they want to do? Well, they want to take your gas stove away. Pretty soon your lawnmower is going to have to be electrically powered. All new houses in the country, they want to have them all electrified, no fossil fuels or natural gas. This electric car phenomena has got to be one of the biggest charades in the world. People do not want electric cars. We've demonstrated time and time again they are not safe. They explode. They're tough to put out in a fire, and then even when you put it out, they spontaneously combust again for a second round. The fumes that come out of these fires are poison. You don't have an electric grid to feed the cars that is economically viable. I have to declare a great victory for John Catsimatidis and WABC. We took on the issue of AM radios because also the first announcement from the car manufacturers was all new electric cars, there'll be no AM radios. And even in the gas-powered cars, some of the manufacturers said they wouldn't have AM radios. It's all part of the same phenomena, the craziness that you can't have a car of your choice, not a consumer demand car, but a dictation from the EPA and the White House about what kind of car you want to drive. They don't want to drill. They shut down oil production. It's a very expensive proposition to have a refinery and to build it. You can't expect people to invest in refineries when they're trying to shut them down. And this has led to the weakness of America, both internally, where we're dependent on other people, and externally, where we've armed our enemies because of the weakness of our energy dependency. Eric, what say you?
So I think it's important for people to understand the climate agenda and the Green New Deal has nothing to do with climate. It's all about a government takeover of the energy sector of our economy. How do we know this? First, John Kerry, who we all love and adore, made it very clear that...
Speak for yourself, Eric.
But love in the most pejorative sense.
Oh.
He admitted that the Paris Climate Accords would achieve absolutely zero in fighting climate change. And why is that? Because neither China, who produces coal-fired plants weekly, India, which has the largest population in the world, and they need to feed their people, or the developing world, who need to bring their people into the 21st century, have any interest in the climate agenda. They have no limits on anything they have to do. They have no obligations to meet, and they all go about just burning fossil fuels, building coal, importing oil, building gas pipelines and oil pipelines. So by being a member of the Paris Climate Accords, we've achieved absolutely nothing. The only country that has obligations to meet and that is meeting them is the United States. Europe, who has agreed to meet certain standards, has completely blown through them and has admitted they're not going to be able to make any of them. So if we're not having any impact on the climate, why are we doing this? All it does is weaken us abroad and destroy, as Richard, as you were pointing out, undermines our economy at home. We also know that we have at least two sources of energy that are green friendly: nuclear, which has absolutely no carbon emissions, and natural gas, which has significantly reduced, virtually zero carbon emissions. Those are both available to us. Those are both viable. They're both they can power our economy and our energy grid, but they are not considered green. Why aren't they considered green? Because if they consider them green, you've solved the problem. But you can't solve the problem. You need a crisis. Because when there's a crisis, government must act, and government must take control. We saw it during COVID. Anytime there's a crisis, remember Rahm Emanuel, crisis is a terrible thing to waste. What did he mean by that? Because if you have a crisis, then the government gets to extend its power. And that's what's going on here. We had a healthcare crisis. What did we get? Obamacare. Has healthcare gotten any less expensive? Has it gotten any more effective? Absolutely not. It was a takeover of the healthcare sector of the economy. Now, because the progressives, as we were discussing earlier, it's a neo-Marxist socialist body. They're trying to take over the energy sector, plain and simple. They want to control our lives, and we need to reject it.
Jesse, last word.
Last word is that I agree with everything that you all said. And it's interesting how they do not speak about the cost of this. You know, the American Action Network said that the Green New Deal, the Democrats' Green New Deal, will cost us $93 to $100 trillion, somewhere in that range. Part of and then the Competitive Enterprise Institute said that H.R. 109 and Senate 559, which is the Green New Deal, would cost the average homeowner, the average household, about $74,000 to deal with this issue. And an energy research firm said that on average, maybe it would be at the low end $35,000. This is wrong. It's what Eric said and what you said. It is the takeover of another American industry.
Well, this has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party.
I think we made everybody feel better, right? Everyone feels better now.
Well, you have to, on Katz and Cosby, we sign off, we say we stand for truth, justice, and the American way. You cannot solve problems unless you identify them and have an honest conversation about them. And that's what this show is about. We want people to start thinking about the natural and probable consequences of these policies that are bringing America to its knees and destroying the future for our children and our grandchildren. And then I wish I could be more upbeat. I want to be more upbeat. By my nature, I'm generally an optimist, but I'm not a fool. And when I look at the border crisis, when I look at the devastating cost of Green New Deal, when I look at the threat of Iran, when I look at the weakness of the political candidates, I'm very concerned. But we'll be back as soon as we can on Let the Record Show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. I want to thank our very esteemed special guest, Eric Levine, and my wonderful friend and colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, for another interesting show. We wish you and your families good health and safety. Thank you very much.
And happy Memorial Day.
And happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day.
For our fallen soldiers.
Let the Record Show is on the air.